Welcome to another edition of Dynasty What If. I'm Paul Patterson. He's Chris Miles. Today we're going to talk about what might happen in 2023. Today our focus is going to be on Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're going to talk about the realistic best case scenario for Amon-Ra or possibly what could go wrong this season. For now, I'm going to kick it over to Chris, who's going to give us the ceiling case for the Sun God.
I think for Amon-Ra, we just need to look at what he did last season. He had a 16.7 point per game, but if you adjust that for games that he left early, it's 18.6. So clear wide receiver one territory. 38% of his games, he was a wide receiver one. He was only 10 points or less in 8% of his games. So he has high floor, high ceiling, low floor, high target share, 28%. Targeted on 29% of his routes. I mean, the dude's just a monster. He's a slot beast, and I don't see any reason that he can't go for 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns this year. They got rid of T.J. Hawkinson. They have basically nobody else proven alongside him except for Jahmyr Gibbs. Jameson Williams is going to miss the first half of the season. A lot of people are losing faith in him. I think that we could see Amon-Ra almost – his ceiling case is basically Cooper Kupp, where he just dominates. He has a 30% target share. The team's been trying to get him a higher ADOT this training camp so far. So if we can see that realized, then that's going to greatly increase his points scored. I really love Amon-Ra St. Brown this year, and I think he has a strong case to be a top 6 to 8 wide receiver.
It's interesting that you mentioned ADOT. That's going to be a large part of my argument as I lay out the downside case for St. Brown. It is really hard to poke holes in a player that's been this good over the past 2 years, but I'm going to do my best. Based on what we've already seen, I do believe that the floor is pretty high, but he is being drafted as the wide receiver 6 in Dynasty with an ADP in the mid-second round. So there are some pretty high expectations as well. And basically, I think what could happen, like if we want to really look at what's the downfall of Amon-Ra St. Brown, if we see Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams take on big roles this year, if they both hit in a big way, live up to expectations, maybe Amon-Ra's target share takes a little bit of a hit, maybe 2 to 3%, which would knock him down into the 25, 26% range. Still very strong, but on a low ADOT, much lower than other elite producing wide receivers. He might find himself more in that high-end wide receiver 2 range of production as opposed to that mid wide receiver 1. And that's not going to crush you necessarily in Dynasty or seasonal leagues, but it would make him a pretty significant reach at his ADP. And I think he would be viewed more as like a Keenan Allen type of receiver as opposed to a foundational asset. So that's kind of where I see the floor. It's still high, but maybe not as high as it's looked over the past 2 years. Maybe the target earning comes down a little bit and the rest of the profile just as a mostly slot player just can't make up for the rest. So that's my floor view. But taking more of a holistic look at Amon-Ra and kind of what we think is going to happen, I honestly think he's most likely to stick around the target share that he's had, just because they did lose Hawkinson. Sam Laporta's a rookie. There's not really any other wide receivers there that are notable, although they did just trade for Denzel Mims, so that's pretty significant.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I think he can. I mean, if this is the guy that he is, he's been this guy since halfway through his rookie season. I do think he can maintain a 28, 27.5% target share, something like that. And maybe the touchdowns will come too, if the overall receptions come down a little bit. So I do agree with you that he absolutely has that mid wide receiver 1 potential. Was that ceiling case just, you putting on a show, trying to find the best case scenario, or do you believe that that's likely for Amon-Ra?
I think it's pretty likely. I really am not a believer in Jameson Williams at this point. I mean, we just haven't seen a player not play games basically for the first year and a half of their career and, do anything really after that. And then, like we said, there's no other wide receivers there. He's like the only wide receiver. I could see him easily putting up a 30% target share. I think it's very possible he gets over 1,400 yards. And if we see some of these running back touchdowns regress back to normal, they got to go somewhere. And I think they're going to go to their best wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I think the touchdown point is very strong because we know Jamal Williams scored 1 million touchdowns last year. The balance between passing and rushing touchdowns is probably going to level out a little bit, and he could absolutely be the recipient of some of those. It's not like Jameson Williams is projected to be a huge red zone threat. I don't think their rookie tight end necessarily is going to be a big threat there either. So he could score some more touchdowns. I do push back on the 1,400 yards. I think that would be very difficult given his just his role. Like, I don't necessarily think his ADOT is going to change significantly, even if that's something they're talking about. Maybe it comes up a little bit, but he's been outside the top 80 in average depth of target for each of his first 2 seasons. I just don't ever see him becoming this like dynamic downfield player. And I don't know if he has quite the yards after catch ability to get him into that stratosphere of yards. But I mean, he can easily have over 100 receptions for sure, and at least flirt with like 1,200 yards. So, 8, 9 touchdowns, you're really cooking at that point. He does have a top 5 ceiling in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, adding Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he'll work underneath a lot, which, they didn't like using Swift for that. They never used Jamal Williams for it. They lost their middle of the field operator in TJ Hawkinson, and they really don't even have any good deep threats. So I think while Gibbs can take that underneath stuff just beyond the line of scrimmage, Amon-Ra will be freed up to take more of the middle of the field and more of the deep stuff. And especially if they're trying to make a point of it already in training camp, I think that just shows where they're going. And, his ADOT's not going to get up to 14 or anything like that. But if it gets up to 10 or 11, like, an average wide receiver 1, I mean, yeah, he could have a huge season.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just whether or not he will continue to be as dominant on a per out basis in that new role. But he has been really strong. Even when he plays outside, he's been effective. So I think he is overall just a really good wide receiver, and he's somebody you should not be shying away from in Dynasty, even though he has kind of a non-traditional archetype for an elite wide receiver. I do think Cooper Kupp is a good call, at least in terms of a rough comp, more of a slot player, fell in the NFL draft, but just has all the tools. So yeah, I mean, high ceiling for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think it sounds like we're both in on him for this year and in Dynasty as well. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like or a comment down below. Really helps us out. And subscribe to Dynasty Football Factory so that you can catch all of our future videos, including more installments of Dynasty What If, which will be coming at you the next few weeks as we lead up to the football season. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.